Well, welcome everyone to episode 4 of Humanizing Healthcare. Today we are honored, and I mean truly honored, to have Steve Dickens with us. He's a longtime friend, incredibly knowledgeable, has dedicated his entire life to working in healthcare and been a key leader in the healthcare world. So rather than me ramble on, Steve, would you mind introducing yourself?
Well, thank you, Owen. It's good to see you, and it's good to be here as well too. As you said, I'm Steve Dickens, and I am the Vice President of Risk and Practice Management for SVMIC, which is a physician-owned and led professional liability company. We insure physicians, their offices, their staff, and the advanced practice practitioners who work with them primarily across the Southeast. We are licensed in a great number of states, but insure primarily physicians and those practitioners in the Southeast. And within my current role, I am responsible for the folks who help physicians run their practices better. We have a group of practice management consultants who have spent years working the front lines in medical practices that work with practice executives and doctors, helping them with the business side of medicine. So everything from financial compensation, operational assessments to compliance issues, human resource consulting. Those folks do a tremendous amount of education about all of those factors related to those areas. Also have a wonderful group of legal nurse consultants who work more on the clinical side of things. They work with the risk side. So their goal is to help practices implement systems and best practices to ensure that they are delivering appropriate care and that they are minimizing the opportunity of risk situations. SVMIC believes that a practice that is run well from a financial perspective and from a risk perspective is much less likely to face a malpractice claim. So we provide these services to all of our physicians simply as a part of their policy. So it's part of our culture, part of who we are and what we do. And I've been at SVMIC for 18 years now. Started on the risk side, educating physicians. We do a lot of live education, a lot of online education, and providing resources as part of that before I moved over to the practice management side. And as things have worked out, we realized that these two departments really belong together. So I work with that great team of people doing that. By way of background, all I've ever done is healthcare. I started on the hospital side of things. So I worked with our physician owned practices or clinics, spent a lot of time working with healthcare, which was very big back in the 90s. It's changed a lot as well, too. So I had the opportunity to work on the integrated side of things with physicians before the opportunity presented itself to work on the physician owned side of things. So I left the hospital, went to work for a physician owned multi specialty group. We did everything from OBGYN to general surgery. We staffed the emergency room at the local hospital. So that was really quite the experience of, seeing it from both sides and seeing how those things interact, each with a different perspective. And so as I said, healthcare is all I've ever done. So I've been at this for 30 years now. By education, I do have a law degree, although I've never practiced law, and have been very heavily involved with MGMA over the years and had the great honor of having served as board chair a number of years ago.
Wow, very, very impressive. We have a parallel background. I started in hospitals and moved over to the physician side, and frankly, I'm much happier on the physician side than I was on the hospital side. So,
Well, I was too. I tell people, hospitals, are very systematic and there's a hierarchy and there's a structure and there's a different philosophy about how things are run. I found much less bureaucracy when I went to the physician owned practice. There was less money in the checking account than there was on the hospital side. I worried a little more about signing checks at the practice than I did at the hospital, but they were both a great experience.
but maybe this, I'm not sure if this is a good question or a bad question, but you are working in the practice management side and you're focusing on what you can do to help address the malpractice question, both on the risk and the management side. How big a risk is it on the management side for staff, if you will? And that could be from the front desk to the medical assistant to whomever. How big a risk is it if they screw up, and relate back to what might happen to the physician relative to being sued in a malpractice situation? In other words, does staff contribute to that, or can staff a little bit? How does that work?
Yeah, that is a good question. And the short answer is yes. Staff, their actions or their misactions, missteps absolutely relate back to the possibility of a malpractice claim. And what we tell physicians is while you may have no knowledge, staff may act without your direction or even against your direction, but the physician is going to be named in the lawsuit. That's just the way our system works.
Right.
The presumption is always that the doctor has more money, and certainly they usually always have more insurance. And the claim really falls on the premise that the physician knew or should have known that these things were happening, or should have had better training, should have had better policies, should have had better systems or checks and balances in place. And while the staff may be named in the lawsuit, the physician is going to be named as well too. The first thing they teach you in law school is you sue everybody. It just improves you sue everybody, and if you get lucky, they'll fight among themselves. So, but yeah. And so that is one of the things that we do focus on, making sure that staff know the limit of their responsibility. It is not uncommon to find staff who've worked with a doctor for a long time to say, he or she's got so much on them. I'm going to take care of this. I know what the answer is going to be. And it invariably, it's that one time that's not what the answer would have been. So we really do encourage staff to understand what the limit is to their scope of responsibility and get direction.
Thank you, Steve, for calling that to my attention. But so in the context that I have in mind relative to this humanizing series, podcast series, is that with so much pressure on the staff to see X number of patients, and the access question is a huge question for everybody. But as we think about this, that the and then let's add one other thing, AI, and what does AI do, and what does that mean? That do we now then have to focus only on the technology side? Do we have to keep focusing on the metrics? Or in I guess my philosophy would be, wait a minute, we got staff. We need to work on training. We need to work on communicating. We need to work on doing all kinds of different things for them. And I wonder, in your exposure with your team and with your exposure that you've had, what your perspective is in relationship to how important that staff is, and then what is the best way to relate to them to make sure that they feel part of the team, that they're buying into the mission, and that sort of thing. How do you feel, and what do you see about that?
Well, I think staff are absolutely essential. Yes, I could not agree more. What we're beginning to see with AI and technology, all of that is, it has its place, and we'll see where it goes. But AI is not going to deliver patient experience. AI is not going to lay eyeballs on the patient. They're not going to check the patient in. I guess you can hook up a machine and do vital signs and all that kind of stuff, but AI is not going to have the same conversation with a patient that a human is going to, whether we're talking about the person at the front desk, the medical assistant, the lab technician, or certainly not the physician or the practitioner. So it is very important that you get the right people, and obviously you need people who have a certain skill set or have certain level of knowledge, but I think more important than that is really the attitude of the staff you get. You can't teach attitude, you can't change it, and if somebody's got a bad one, they are more than likely just going to keep that. So I always like to start with people who have a good attitude, and then is this someone who has the skills or can be taught the skills to do it, and to make sure that they do feel like they're part of a team. You want to build that culture where everybody understands what their role is. And everyone in a medical practice should feel that they are part of the care delivery team. No disrespect to anybody along the continuum, but it takes everybody. Somebody has got to check the patient in. Somebody has got to send the bills. Somebody has to do the vitals. The doctor has to see the patient. All of those things happen. Somebody has to clean the bathrooms and vacuum the floor. And if leaders are willing to take the time to train staff and to talk to them so that they understand not just what they're supposed to do, but why they do it and why it makes a difference. That's really the key. People should feel a pride in that, I'm helping the doctor, do this. I'm helping the nurse do this. What I do translates into what the billing folks are doing. And all of us together are taking care of this patient. And ideally, that should be fairly seamless, should be behind the scenes for the patient. But you got to start with attitude. You've got to tell people what to do, why they're doing it, and give them the tools to do it. So often we're so desperate to get somebody in, we hire them and then just turn them loose. And we've got to spend the time with them on the front end. And then as time goes on, communication is so important. What's going on in the practice? We all follow the news to some degree. I try to avoid it as much as possible, but
Yeah.
you know, talk to your staff about what's going on in healthcare and what this means for us and what we're doing. Because I can assure you that in the absence of knowledge, I will make up something far more interesting than what you would have told me. So, again, it's really about communication and being there. And again, for leaders, your staff knows their job better than you do. So listen to them. Find opportunities for people to cross train and to work together. All of those things are just so important to make them feel like they're needed and they're wanted.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir, at least to me, when you say
I'm
these
sure
kinds
of
of things,
that.
because I agree with that. But you mentioned communication quite a bit. Now, what have you found, and what has your team found is probably the one, two, or three most effective ways to communicate with the staff?
I tend to over communicate. I probably tell more than I should, to be perfectly honest. But I have found
I
that
don't think that's bad.
I don't think it's bad either.
No, I
You
think
know,
I mean one of the keys of humanizing is to be transparent as much as you can. Uh,
It is, and I feel like if you tell staff everything that you can tell them, when that inevitable thing comes up, well, I really can't talk to you about that, or I will when I can, if I can, that you build that level of trust. But I like frequent checkpoints. My team, we have a standing weekly appointment, and we do it virtually early in the morning, so it is a come as you are. So if you're on the road, great. Maybe you're dressed up, maybe you've got your suit, maybe you're in your car and you're taking it just by phone, listening to it, not watching it. Maybe you're at home, maybe it's your desk, but it's an early morning. We've all agreed to the time, we've all agreed to the day. And, sometimes people don't make it because they're in an appointment or whatever, but we have this standing weekly thing where we check in with each other. I provide updates from any meetings I've been in that they need. They bring any quirky questions or problems that they've had. And if we need to discuss a project that's coming up or something, we're able to do that. Some weeks they're 15, 20 minutes. Some weeks they're 30 minutes. Some weeks they're 45 minutes or an hour. They're on the calendar for an hour every week. And we just know that time is there. And again, it's just about that connection that they know, oh, hey, I've got this, but also, painting the relationship that if they've got something that can't wait or they need to discuss it in private, we can do that. So I like to schedule communications. We have these weekly check-ins. We have quarterly team meetings where we get together face to face. And, there are a lot of emails that go back and forth, things that can't wait. I just every opportunity. And again, if somebody needs something, it's a text.
So that works in your current working environment. How do you see an application like that in a physician practice,
You
in
know,
the inner workings of the practice?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we recommend in a physician practice is what we refer to as a huddle. And, it's where the team gets together every morning right before the beginning of the day. And we always suggest that they should be less than 10 to 15 minutes. Everybody should be standing so that nobody gets comfortable. And you could just really kind of quickly outline, okay, here's what's going to happen today so they can be prepared and be ready for it. But you also can share any information about, oh, we've got Mrs. Smith coming in today. Let's remember, she really has difficulty ambulating. We're going to have to help get her to the room. Or we've got Mr. Jones coming in with, his, and remember, he's got a really, difficult daughter that always comes with him. Or Susie is going to be off on Friday. We're going to have to cover that. And, and even little stuff like that relieves the frustrations of not knowing or not being prepared in the day. And then, if there are more important things that need to be covered as well, we can talk about those things too. But I find that when you have more frequent check ins, they tend to be quicker and things don't build, and it eliminates the gossip and it eliminates the questions.
So you're actually suggesting that you're being more proactive than reactive in
Absolutely.
terms of being able to prepare for the day and move forward rather than reacting to something that occurs at 10:30 and screws everything
Right.
up.
Yeah. It just blows everybody off.
Yeah. And I like your point about a quarterly meeting. I actually worked with a group that had 9 different offices. And once a quarter on a Wednesday afternoon, they closed every clinic and rented a room at a hotel. So they fed everybody, and then they got everybody together and had a overview of the company, the practice, and then they would get the MAs together and the receptionists or front desk staff and so on, so that everybody would be able to talk about the type of issues that they had. So we ended up with a lot more consistency. So when a
Yes.
doctor had to go from office A to office B to office C, they may see different people, but the procedures were pretty much the same.
Yeah, in standardizing the way that a practice does things like that
Yeah,
just creates so much more efficiency. And to your point, a doctor can work with any nurse, a nurse can work with any doctor. It is, I do believe, a cost saver in the long run.
I think that really makes a big difference. But the other part of communication is listening.
Yes.
And, from the staff, how do you address the point that the staff has some concerns or some issues or whatever? And in terms of talking to the team members and the leadership, the management of the practices about the key point of let's listen.
Well, that is one of those things. To get staff to communicate to you is really about trust. And you have to, it's culture, it's trust. You have to demonstrate, I'm going to sit and listen to you. I'm not going to argue with you while you're wrong. I'm not going to start putting out excuses. I'm going to listen. Now, we may have a conversation after that about, whatever it is that this was misinterpreted or this isn't, whatever it is. But you have to demonstrate that you're going to listen, and that may require research, that may require follow up, that may require change. And again, I really feel like that if we listen to our frontline employees and ask them questions, how would you have handled this? They know their jobs, they know their jobs well. And I think you can, improve things. I think listening to employees builds loyalty, it builds their commitment. They feel engaged, they feel ownership. And it's one of those things that takes time. If you truly want feedback, then you have to solicit it and you have to use it.
That's an amazing perspective, and you use probably the key word in management today is trust. And if the staff doesn't trust you because you haven't been consistent, you haven't listened, you've gone off somewhere else and left them alone, whatever it is, that's put a barrier or a gap between them and that relationship. You've blown the word trust out of the water, and once that's gone, you're going to end up with turnover. You're going to end up with disgruntled staff. You're going to end up with patients being greeted with anger to a degree.
Well,
You
absolutely.
know,
It trickles down. It's contagious. The good is just as contagious as the bad is, and you get to decide which one you want.
yeah, I like that's a good. The good is just as contagious as the bad. That's a good comment. In fact, just in episode 3, I went through my last 18 months. Well, it's more than that now, but of dealing with healthcare as a patient, and nothing serious. It's all fine. But the thing that got to me more than anything else was when I walked into the office and the receptionists were so busy doing so many other things that they hardly looked up. One office is check in with the kiosk, and I never talked to anybody at the front desk. Nobody ever greeted me. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm paying, I'm a paying customer. I'm here. Acknowledge me. And that's one of the things that I'm excited about with AI is that we'll hopefully get some of the routine tasks out of the way so that the front desk can be ready to greet and establish that relationship with me or whomever as a patient. And, once you get to know that patient, then you can say, I saw your son graduated last week. Wow, what a bond that can create. And that patient will probably, well, not probably, will come back and will probably be more compliant with their care plan, not just because of what the doctor says, but because of, hey, I feel really good and comfortable about the culture that's there in that practice.
Absolutely. We believe that a patient who feels cared about, who has a positive experience, is less likely to sue. And I mean, obviously, we want to deliver good health care. But we're an insurance company too, so yeah, we really do.
Understand?
It does it makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, then last week I listened to an hour-long webinar on high performing medical practices, and they should have listened to you and had you on that webinar, because the people that were interviewed, all I heard them talk about was make sure you get the template right so that the staff knows all the questions that they need to ask and all the things that they need to do. And I'm going, where's the listening point? Where's the staff involvement? It was just shocking to say that the high performing medical practice requires templates so that you can shepherd and autocratically tell everybody this is how it has to be done, and if you don't check all the boxes on the template, you got a problem. And so, I mean, that goes to the question of efficiency as much as it does about human relations. But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I know there are some people who believe that they can, set the script and they can prescribe a structure that creates, the most efficiency. But I think you can over regulate, if you will, those things. I know it's not regulations, but you can over direct those things. And when you take some level of autonomy away from your staff, you're really seeking to create robots. And maybe AI will get to the point that robots have a personality. I'm not so sure about that, but it should not feel mechanical. And I've been in these practices where staff are afraid to do anything. They can't even answer the most simplest question because it's not on their script. They've not been told what to do. And I've seen employees that are kind of like a dog that you've kicked. They're afraid of their boss at that point. It goes back to the onboarding and the selection and training of staff. Get the right people, train them to do what they need to do, give them the tools to do it, and then let them do it. If they've got the parameters of what it is that they need to do and you've hired the right people, as long as their goal is to provide a positive patient experience, then it's going to work out. Yeah, and I get we've got to get the insurance card and we've got to do this and check it. I get all of that, and I realize there are a lot of things that are out of control in our practice, but I don't think you can turn employees into a robot and expect that it's going to feel like a personal experience. So I would disagree with scripting everything in total. You can give guidelines, you can give parameters, but you can't script for every situation, because if you try to do that, eventually the employee is going to face a situation and they don't know what to do and they'll be afraid to do anything.
So that goes back to the very first question that I asked in terms of the malpractice risk of the employees, because some people are going to say, well, I can't give them as much independence as you're talking about because they'll screw up and then I'll get sued. I mean, I can hear that coming from some of the listeners that would participate in this program.
Well, I would counter that, and that someone who says that might be a little too much of a control freak. But again, have you got the right people? Have you trained them? Have you given them the tools? If you've done that, they're not going to screw up anything so badly that you can't recover from it. I'm not saying let a medical assistant practice medicine without a license, but I am saying, give them enough latitude to be able to handle sticky situations, to be able to handle patients, to be able to provide a positive patient experience within the confines of their role.
Mhm.
And I've always had this rule. I'm not a big policy and procedure person, but I recognize the need for them and of course have them. And I've always told my employees, Here are the policies and procedures. Here are the rules. If something happens and you need to make a split-second decision to go outside of these because it's in the best interest of the patient, then you'll get one free pass. You'll get that one free pass. You do it, then you come tell me about it and we'll talk about it. Was this the right decision in this situation? Or maybe you found a better way to do something and we need to change our policy. Or was this not the right thing to do? And this is why you shouldn't have done it. So don't do it again. And I've not created a dog that I've kicked that's now afraid of me. One free pass, but my two golden rules for my employees and anybody who works for you will tell you this: don't lie to me and don't surprise me. I should never go to my boss's office and him ask me about something that you knew about that you didn't tell me.
Yeah. Well,
So,
those are those are teachable moments, and those are the
yeah,
opportunities that you have. If an employee is not willing to do that in terms of trying to resolve the issue and then
yes,
come back to you and say, "This is what I did." One of the key points you made was that employee may have a better idea about how to do things, and by being open and willing to talk about it,
right.
they have all of a sudden made a major change within the organization.
Yeah. And of course, I'm talking about, the employee shouldn't be doing anything illegal or unethical.
Right. I mean,
Those
there,
are,
yeah, there are limits, of course.
there are limits,
Yeah.
but, I think sometimes we're a little too quick to think we can script every situation and discipline every situation when perhaps it's a teaching moment as opposed to a disciplinary moment.
Yeah. 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 Well, we're running it up against the typical wall that I say, but let me ask sort of a philosophical, futuristic kind of question as we wrap this up. What do you see with AI? Because and here's where I'm going. I read an article by Fareed Zakaria this weekend, and he said there's two things to think about with two letters. One is AI, and the other one is HI, artificial intelligence and human intelligence. And I'm going, wow, why didn't I think of that? But
Good.
it speaks to, again, the whole point of what we're trying to do here is to talk about recognizing the ability of the staff, the talent of the staff, and not rely 100% on AI. But that all being said, how do you see AI kind of fitting into the world as we know it?
Well, I I'm one of those people. I think we always have to be concerned about unintended consequences, and we'll see what those are as time goes on. I think AI has the potential to be a tool and to be a resource, just as we've made a lot of advances in medicine over the last 100 years. Drugs, electronic health records, some of the equipment, whether it's MRIs, PET scans, all those types of things, the tests we're running. So, but none of those took the place of the human interaction or of the physician. They are a tool, and I think we have to recognize that. I don't think we should ever delegate our decision making capacity to a machine. Again, whether we use them in radiology, whether we're using them as ambient scribes, or whether we're using it, we're delegating pre-authorizations to it, whatever it may be. I think that's what it is. They're tools. And yes, things are going to change. It's probably going to change the way we work in an office and the tasks that humans do things. I think we should be careful and cautious as we implement that. Again, unintended consequences. Everybody thought kudzu was a great thing when they brought it to America, and we see how that's worked out. Opioids were a wonder drug, and we see how that's worked out. Time will tell about AI. We've not seen litigation with it yet. The thing in our world, everybody's concerned, well, who's going to get sued if AI makes a mistake? Is it the AI company or is it the doctor? I don't know what the answer is to that yet, but I think we find ways to make it work for us instead of us working for it.
Okay, that is unbelievably great. I think you and I could probably spend the next 2 hours talking about all this stuff, but I know you have to get to work. But one of the things that I've done in these podcasts is challenge people to think about the context that we've put this together on, and then think about what they've done themselves at this point in their practice and then to give themselves a medal, like the Olympics. So if they followed everything you said and have done it to perfectly, they give themselves a gold medal. If
Okay.
they've done a few things, they get a silver. If they've done just a couple, they get a bronze. And if they haven't done anything, then they don't medal. So,
Okay.
so the challenge to the listener is to put the whole discussion we've had into context and then to rank themselves. And then what I'm hoping will happen is eventually people will share their thoughts with me so that I can then share those thoughts in future episodes,
Hmm.
so that we can all continue to learn. Because the whole point of this is not for you and I to have a good time talking. The whole point of this is for both you and I to learn, but especially for the listener to be able to learn from the experiences that we've had. So, Steve,
And I think that's great.
I want to thank you
Sorry.
very much for giving me your time and giving all of us your time and your knowledge. Who knows? Maybe somebody will say, "Hey, do another one with Steve." So I might have to bug you a little bit, but
And that
anyhow,
will be just fine.
I've really enjoyed this, and best of luck to you and to all the
Thank you.
listeners. Hopefully, you found this as informative and exciting as I have. And thanks again, Steve. Appreciate it very much.
Very welcome.